The Almost Perfect Podcast.
Welcome to the Almost Perfect Podcast, a celebration of fuck-ups, failures, and falling flat on your face. This is a podcast that believes you can learn from experience, but that experience doesn't have to be your own. Hi, I'm Bob Perfect, and I'm a functional fuck-up. Let's learn from somebody else's mistakes. And today we're learning from Dylan Buckle, aka Noobslice, who is the events manager for eSports company ATK. Although some of you might know him from his streaming days, and me personally, I know him from when he used to be involved in the tabletop gaming sector. So Dylan has been involved in gaming and esports and tabletop for a very long time and has a deep passion for games and for growing them and making the community around it a much better place. So he's someone I had to get on the podcast because he's one of the most genuine people that I know, and I love just how much passion he has for gaming and how much passion he has for community and people in general. He's a very genuine human being, and I think it helps him a lot in his job and just in his community, because growing an audience in streaming is not easy, as we get into on this podcast. So if you are someone who's been thinking, hey, I want to get into Twitch, I want to get into streaming, well, Dylan's got some advice for you on this podcast. We also get into esports in South Africa. We get into the good and the bad. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, as they say, because of course South Africa is a unique country with a lot of unique challenges in general. And we are in that weird space of being, I don't know what, it's developing countries and developed countries, I think the terminology is. When I was in school, it used to be first world and third world, but you know what I mean. Like, we've got disparity and we've got affluence, and we've got people like me who have things even though they don't really have much money. Somehow I've got a decent computer now. Over the years, I managed to make that work. But not everyone in South Africa has a good computer, and so obviously there's access issues beyond obviously not just having a good computer. You know, we've probably got some deeper issues than that. But yeah, we discuss what it's like to be in esports in a country where not everyone has access to it, and providing that access kind of has its own challenges as well. So yeah, that's what you can expect on this podcast. This is a listener-supported podcast, which means it is brought to you by you, and you can support it by going to patreon.com/almostperfect, or you can buy a mug from me. They are 100 Rand each, and 10 Rand from each mug sale goes to Sisonke. Now, Sisonke is an organization that is working to decriminalize sex work in South Africa. And you can check them out by going to sisonke.org.za. But yeah, you buy a mug from me, they're $100, and 10 Rand from that will go to Sisonke. How's your week been? Probably a lot better than Donald Trump's. That was one of the poorest attempts at a coup we have ever seen. I mean, I remember, wasn't there like fucking Margaret Thatcher's son or something? Am I wrong here? Am I getting my lines crossed here? But I remember something about like Margaret Thatcher's son wanting to overthrow Mozambique. I'm definitely getting that story wrong. But ever since that failed coup, now this is the second most pathetic failed coup that we have ever experienced, that we have ever borne witness to. Although I must say, all these companies coming and banning Trump at the end of his presidency is just pussy shit, man. That is just straight up, yeah, pussy. You are fucking pussy. Obviously, now that the Democrats are in power, all these people are like, and Donald Trump has like 2 weeks, so he can't do anything about these bans. But before, when he was in power, they were towing the line. They're like, oh, we can't do anything about it. Our hands are tied. How can we ban this guy? Now it's, oh no, he incited this shit. Didn't incite anything else before. Hey, no racist events have happened over the last 4 years, partially due to Donald Trump being in power. Anyway, why am I talking about America? South Africa, probably because South Africa's news is way more depressing. That is actually the honest truth. We've got all the issues, so I don't actually want to delve into them. Yeah, man, my week's been weird. As some of you would know, I went to my grandfather's funeral last week. It was weird. There were only 7 of us there because of COVID, and also he wanted a small funeral. But it was weird because it was maybe 500 meters from the flat I grew up in, and just in a small room, and with like a renter pastor who didn't really know the vibe and said some things that didn't necessarily apply. Yeah, it was strange, but also incredibly sad, and obviously I cried, and I did think a bit about what the pastor had to say, even though I don't believe in any of that. It is still, I don't know, in those moments, pertinent. I don't know if pertinent's the right word. It's almost definitely not. But let's just say important to reflect and to think about stuff like, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But don't really know what to say about that. But I am now living in my grand's house. Like I said last week, I would be moving here, and I've got my computer here, and I am currently talking to you from the study. So if it sounds different, if it sounds weird, if you can hear crickets in the background, I will work on that. I'll find a way to not have that happen. If it means murdering a million crickets for you, I will do that for you. I will do that for you, the listener of the Almost Perfect podcast. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting year, because basically that's the plan. I'm going to be staying here for this year whilst my gran tries to find another place to live, like a smaller place to live in and stuff like that. And yeah, so you're gonna get probably some tales and adventures from my move and from living with my gran, because I'm sure it's going to be very entertaining at times. Right now though, it's very late actually. I am talking to you at 12:30 at night. I probably shouldn't tell you that because it ruins the illusion a little bit. You're meant to think that I did this on Friday. Obviously, that's how it's done. All of this was just done seconds before you listen to it. Anyway, I am rambling now. It is late, and that means it is time for me to get to the shout-outs, because right here on the Almost Perfect podcast, we have the titular titles tier over on Patreon. Now, this is a $10 tier, and it is a tier where you can become a part of the cast and crew. And that means you get shouted out. You get a job title that you get to pick, and you get shouted out. So, shout out to Chief Sales Officer of Settled Heresies in the Greater Overberg region, Rousseau. Shout out to Julian. They are the king. Shout outs to His Excellency President for Life Field Marshal Stephen Olafia, VC, DSO, MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth, and Fishes of the seas, and Conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general, and certain parts of KwaZulu-Natal in particular, or something slightly less pretentious, like executive producer. Shout outs to Vishendra Naidu, who is my spiritual advisor, and shout outs to Tyron Love, who is the pantsless weasel. That's everything I think I need to tell you. Yeah, that's everything I think I need to tell you. So without further ado, here comes the Almost Perfect podcast with Dylan Buckle. So how are you living, Dylan?
Hey, how you doing, Bob? You doing well?
Yeah, man, I'm good, bro. I'm doing pretty decent. I was saying to you now, I've actually been home this morning and I've gotten a few games of Dragon Ball Fighters, so I'm feeling nice and relaxed, and I'm feeling like I did all the prep I needed to for this conversation, you know?
Yeah, no, awesome, man. I got in a few hours of gaming last night to end off the weekend, so I think we're both in the right headspace for this.
What were you jamming?
Oh, last night I was jamming Riot Games' new game, Legends of Runeterra. It's a card game, so I know that you are quite a card game aficionado, being someone that's heavily involved with Magic the Gathering. It's almost Riot's way to get involved in the card game industry.
Yeah, no, I actually know Legends of Runeterra. I've been brewing around Teemo since the beta, essentially. I dip in and out of that game from time to time, but I love Yeah, it's a game that I have really been enjoying when I'm frustrated with Magic, basically. Whenever I get like annoyed with like various aspects of Magic and Arena and stuff, I just go and play Runeterra, Legends of Runeterra for a bit. But yeah, so you've been enjoying it?
Yeah, no, I've also been playing it pretty much since release. I didn't really get involved in the beta, probably for 1 or 2 games, but I do really enjoy how they've taken a game like Runeterra and they've addressed all the issues, kind of like you said, which shows that we're in a very competitive gaming market at the moment. You know, like there seems to be no one that's dominating any particular scene, which makes it all kind of very exciting. I think we've seen, Titans fall recently with Cyberpunk, not exactly having the dream release that they would have loved.
Yeah.
And we've seen some favorites that have just stuck around forever, the recursion of games that have been around and developed for ages like Rust. So yeah, Runeterra is a really cool case study in that regard. But yeah, I think you and I have a very vested interest in card games. So it was just interesting that that's what I was playing before we chatted today.
Yeah, because that's essentially where we know each other from. Well, we know each other from the internet, but also crossover with Magic the Gathering. That's been the game that I've had like in my life probably since I was 16, no, even younger than that. I mean, I first saw that game when I was in grade 3. I think I was at boarding school in Wartburg, and the older guys were playing it like on their beds. And that's like my first memory of Magic. And then when I was a teenager in high school and kids were playing in a classroom, I was like, I remember this game. And I started to get involved in it, then went and played tournaments at Whirling Wheels down here in Durban. And slowly but surely, yeah, it's consumed my life from various times. So how did you get involved with it?
Well, with Magic the Gathering specifically, I was extremely fortunate to have actually entered into the corporate world in gaming, and the first being tabletop gaming. And that's where you and I met, was at the convention in Durban for the first time, I believe, while I was up there
Icon.
just assisting and managing tournaments. Oh, at Icon in Durban, yeah. So yeah, it's been an absolute journey. So I was busy playing a lot of card games that weren't necessarily Magic the Gathering at the time at a hobby store. And someone who was working for the distributor of these card games came in and said to me, like, hey, we're looking for someone to run organized play for us nationally for a whole bunch of games, including Magic the Gathering. So yeah, I sent in my CV and that's how I got the job. So my first, after I worked in sales, my second job was in the gaming industry, running organized play for South Africa for these kinds of games. And yeah, the rest is pretty much history. I think gaming, I can now say, has been a majority of my career, which is not what many people can say.
Wait, but how did you get that job? What were the qualifications? Because that's that's a pretty big task, to be running organized play for multiple games. I'm assuming you mean stuff like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and those sorts of games as well, right?
Yeah, so in the developing market, there's always an opportunity for people to almost come and define their position, define their job. When it came to qualifications and things that I'd done prior to actually getting the job, it really just included being passionate. And I had been running tournaments at my friendly local gaming store already. And I think that's what caught the eye of the individual that said, hey, you do a pretty good job at this. Come and try your hand at a national level. So then I started getting pulled into more of the administrative, the more kind of, client relations side of things, where I had to stand in the middle between our international suppliers, their demands on us for sales and organized play figures, and then also trying to, at the same time, breed community, in local gaming stores at a distance, because I was based in Cape Town. I mean, gaming in the hobby stores have taken place all over Johannesburg, Cape Town, even the smaller regions, Bloemfontein, even outskirts, Riebeek Kasteel in the Western Cape. So yeah, it was honestly them taking a leap of faith, but they needed someone to fulfill the position. And yeah, luckily my passion for people is really what carried me through, because my number one goal in arranging events or experiences for anyone is making sure that those involved, especially the consumer, really has a place and that the community is serviced. So that kind of made everything else easier as I went along.
That is one thing I did actually notice about you and the conversations we've had over the years, and like just from watching you work at the various cons and stuff like that, you take multiple people's perspectives into account. You're not just like, this is the way I see things and this is the way my friends see things, so this is the way it is. You actually do open up lines of communication between people. But how do you approach those kinds of situations, like approaching different game stores where some are catering to a more competitive market and the player base there is a bit more ruthless and wants more value, people a bit like me? And then at other stores, or even at the same store, you've got your players who are just there for fun and they actually hate coming up against, the more competitive players, and they just want to build their fun decks in whatever game they're playing. So how do you approach these sorts of like challenges?
Well, you really just described the biggest issue that I faced while working in the tabletop industry was that at the end of the day, even though I was coordinating organized play on a national level, I wasn't the one who was necessarily executing it. So it really came down to each individual store owner. They were their own community managers in their own sense, because they had to decide, what kind of events am I running? What kind of people am I allowing? What kind of culture am I allowing? So my role was not as much as actually creating these experiences, but also imparting knowledge from both suppliers and from our experience to these community managers. The big issue that I faced is that most of these guys had been in the game longer than I had. So if anything, that experience was actually me learning from them and being able to use different stores as case studies to be able to say, cool, this is how I would structure a competitive environment. This is how I would structure a casual environment. This is how I would actually cater for both in different times, creating schedules. So that was actually where my biggest frustration came in, is that my passion for people and creating experiences really made me want to be a hobby store owner, at the end of the day, actually be able to bring these experiences directly to people the way that I envision it and the way that I hope it can service these people. Whereas now, funnily enough, I'm sort of closer to that working in eSports, because I now no longer represent a whole bunch of people trying to create experiences on their behalf, but really trying to create experiences on behalf of one brand across different titles. So I'm definitely more in the driving seat.
And that brand is?
Oh, I work for a company called ATK Arena based in Cape Town. We're a multi-gaming organization which has a number of professional esports teams in South Africa. Our CSGO team's about to go overseas to North America to go and boot camp there to try and get involved in the scene there. But we also have an arena in Cape Town, and we run events quite often for many types of players and gamers.
The Apex team was getting shouted out hard like 2 weekends ago, I think it was. I can't remember what the tournament was called, but I was watching it on Twitch. And the Apex Legends team was just like the South African legends and all of that, this is South African sensations. The commentators were shouting them out like super hard.
Yeah, well, that's actually fantastic. Our CEO, Warren Barkhuizen, he really focused on creating an environment for the players where they can reach their fullest potentials. So that pretty much means providing funding, providing bootcamp opportunities, providing equipment, providing anything that these players might need to become professional athletes in their own right. And the Apex team did qualify for the ALGS, the autumn qualifiers or playoffs, where they got to take on some of the biggest names in the EMEA region. And that's really the business model, I think, at this point, is to, equip, but also having the arena on the ground also creates a lot of opportunity to breed community and provide experiences as well.
Well, what is the arena on the ground like for people that might not have any clue what you're talking about there?
So, because we have access to the arena, we can run these almost LAN type of events where we get people in to come.
Well, what is the arena?
So the arena is a professional esports arena based in Claremont in the Western Cape. And it is essentially a internet cafe on steroids. I don't know how else best to describe it. top of the range computer rigs, top of the range monitors and peripherals, massive internet connection, a broadcast and streaming room where people can come in and they can get involved, and they can either stream as a content creator, or they can also have those kinds of services. But mostly it's to provide a platform even for casual players to be able to come in and use the equipment at an hourly rate. Pretty much, like I said, an internet cafe on steroids.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there were a couple internet cafes. I ended up working at one called Cyberhaven for a while. And then there was another one called The Zone. And I used to play Counter-Strike for hours. I was a part of a clan. We were called MDK, of course, Murder, Death, Kill, Shout outs to Tom Pauling, who was on that team with me. And yeah, man, that was some of my genuinely fondest memories of childhood, is just playing Warcraft 3 until the early hours of the morning, at a LAN, or even just at an internet cafe, just meeting up with different kids and just testing your skills against the neighborhood or against everyone around you. And that's one of the cool things, is actually getting to be in the room. And it's such a different experience to, being alone at home.
No, for sure. And what's fantastic as well about, the 20s, that we can now say we're in the roaring 20s, we are in a place where, our internet infrastructure has grown, where these kind of communities can exist online, don't even have to go to a venue. And obviously with the COVID pandemic, we've had to pivot our strategies with events and experiences. And, by pivoting these tournaments and experiences and broadcasts online, we've been able to continue to grow these communities while doing it from the comfort of, everyone's own home.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, because then at least it opens things up, because that's what I think a lot of people have seen with making things online, at least just throughout, like not even just in terms of gaming and that, I'm talking in terms of all sorts of events, is that it's allowed people to reach broader audiences essentially. So that is obviously one of the big advantages of online gaming in general, is that you will find your community no matter what small little game you love dearly. You will find a community that plays it online.
100%. And you can find that community in a bunch of ways as well. You can find them on Twitch as an example, where you're able to consume content pretty much for free, even though there will be a bunch of ads thrown in your face, thanks Twitch. But there's also the ability to go onto Discord and find Discord communities, which is a communications platform where you'll be able to go and speak to like-minded people, pair up for games, get information, tips, all of those kinds of things. So we're really living in an age where creating content or even just experiencing a game title really goes beyond just sitting in front of your computer. And I think that as an individual myself, who my passion is to create experiences for people no matter where, I'd like to continue to emulate that through esports and gaming, both competitive and non-competitive. Unfortunately, competitive tends to sometimes, take the crown, because that's where, you get your viewership. So your broadcasting comes in. You're then able to attract sponsors. So this juggle between servicing the community, but also meeting, some sort of end, financially or budgetary, it is still there, and those pressures are there. But I'm very excited for South Africa and how far we've come, especially in the last 2 years, having to pivot as we have for COVID and seeing all of the tournament organizers and people out there coming forward and creating experiences. It's just absolutely amazing.
I imagine that's quite a difficult task though, because of everyone having different internet connections. So you must have faced some difficulties with people having lag or different like pings, and was that a concern going into these things?
So South Africa is, as we know, it's a country with many different, I want to say, classes, different access to resources, and unfortunately, you kind of do see the repercussions in the numbers. But according to the standard that we already kind of operate at, we do see a large amount of people that have sufficient internet, that have sufficient equipment, that are able to participate in these events. But at the back of our minds, we do know there is a large part of South Africa and a lot of South Africans that don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the means to participate. And that's why also a grassroots approach to these kinds of things is something that is at the back of all of our minds. It's just that we have to find a way to be able to do grassroots. And I know there are a bunch of organizations out there who invest in grassroots esports by providing to people who are maybe underprivileged or don't have access to the same amenities the opportunity to compete. So on a high level, there are enough South Africans that have this kind of technology to be able to participate, I don't know, with the sufficient amount of ability. But the real issue lies in giving that accessibility to all South Africans. But I think that kind of problem persists through every kind of industry.
Yeah, 100%. Although, do you see mobile gaming as a potential avenue for that? And is there even a pro mobile gaming scene?
There are amazing amounts of interest being shown towards mobile games internationally and locally. I know that investment is being made, and I think that mobile gaming is definitely the future, as a large portion of gaming. I know there was a debate on social media not too long ago about, are mobile gamers real gamers, and a lot of people were polarized. I think if you're sitting there with a 40,000 Rand PC, and a 10,000 Rand monitor, and you pay 1,000 Rand a month for your internet, you're going to say, no, they're not real gamers because, they just play on a mobile. Whereas I believe that each platform provides its own experience. If a Switch
100%.
player, a Nintendo Switch player is considered a gamer, then a mobile gamer is a gamer. And I think that the accessibility that mobile gaming provides is out of this world. We've seen some amazing things internationally with things like PUBG Mobile, where the game
that's the one.
Yeah.
Like that game has drawn people around the world together.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also, you can see that the success of that platform is because of the amount of accessibility, the amount of people they get in, the amount of people that they reach is so incredibly high. But then others would argue that, the PC gamers are where the high-end, watchable esports is at. So you might not necessarily get PC gamers watching PUBG Mobile, but you'll get the people who play PUBG Mobile watching PUBG Mobile. So it's this weird, delicate balance, of trying to figure out where do you want to invest because at the forefront of esports, whether we like it or not, is PC gaming. We've seen it with Dota 2. They've had some of the biggest prize pools in the world. League of Legends, Rainbow Six Siege, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. These games, all of their esports happens primarily on computer, PC.
Fighting gaming is the one that where consoles would probably be like fighting games is probably the only one where consoles are winning out, right?
Interestingly enough, Call of Duty was also predominantly console for the longest time, where I understand that now Call of Duty has pivoted as well to actually move their competitive scene over to computer. I do stand corrected because I'm not the biggest Call of Duty fan and we haven't been working very closely with it, but I do know that Call of Duty for the longest time was also what sold consoles for the most part, as well as FIFA and fighting games.
I don't care about FIFA. Like I don't enjoy it. I don't hate it. But like I got over it being the party game of choice. I just got over being average at it at parties that I bought it and played it for months just to like learn how to be decent at it. So that when people pulled it out like at parties, I could like not just get my ass handed to me by the guy who was like playing online every day,
Yeah, and I'm also really happy to say, at least from my personal opinion, that party games have also really developed. And I think that a great entry into gaming for people are party games. I mean, there's the Jackbox Party Pack. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Essentially, you've got a game on your console or on your PC that, you put this up on the TV and you have everyone with their mobiles then sign in through their browser and they're able to participate with this game in real time. So a lot of people on streams as well have been able to create this party environment. And we've seen such an explosion of that, at least personally, during COVID, where, a lot of people are stuck at home, can't really go out. So we find these games that are party games and interactive over the internet.
Well, like Among Us was probably the biggest one there.
Yeah, Among Us is just an absolute... For me, I have a very personal opinion about Among Us. And I say that Among Us is a game that's designed on so many board game concepts, that people won't actually, it's 100%. It's, One Night Werewolf or Ultimate Werewolf kind of thing. And when I tell people that, this board game has existed forever, it just goes to show that great ideas and great mechanics can exist in multiple forms, really. And I was actually talking to someone today about why Rust has gained so much popularity all of a sudden. Like Rust is now boomed.
I haven't actually heard about it. Tell me about it, please.
Oh my goodness, Rust is basically a survival game. I haven't played it a lot. I've got 12 hours on record, so I'm not the right person to talk about Rust, but I understand that essentially you have to collect resources, build bases, and then defend yourself against other people on the server who want to come and raid you and steal your stuff. That's like the main gist of it. It's increasingly popular over the last while because it's, there's been Twitch streamers and content creators that have brought it to the fore, but this game's been around for the longest time. So as well, like create ideas that just need catalysts to be able to get caught on. And I think that Rust is a fantastic game, but however, it's a labor of love because you wake up the next morning, someone's come and stolen all your shit. If anything, it's like real life. If you don't look after your stuff, someone's going to come and take your patch. So
that kind of is like the mobile gaming of like kingdom stuff, like where you've got to build your castles and like have your defenses up. People come and raid you. You wake up and you got to rebuild your stuff. Similar concepts, I guess.
Yeah, it's just a lot more complicated with crafting and, combat because, obviously mobile gaming has its restrictions where these games have complete engines that they can run on, for movement, environment, combat, crafting and all of that. But yeah, I remember being at Comic-Con 2018 where they had the Clash Royale finals. They had, these gamers come and sit on the stage with their phones and they played for a trip overseas and their share of, I think, 100,000 Rand. So circling back to mobile gaming, there's a lot of investment and a lot of opportunity there.
Damn, that's actually, I wasn't expecting that. One of the things that what you kind of brought up just now was about Twitch and how you found out about games through Twitch. Do you see the rise of gaming as it's been pretty much over the last 10 years as because of Twitch, or at least through streaming as being this thing now? Because it's both are just continuing to grow and grow and grow.
I mean, streamers on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, any platform really are just marketing avenues for game designers at times. I've seen a lot of opportunities that people have been given they get paid to play certain games because they know that people will look at this game being played and be like, I want to try it. It's something that I want to do. So Twitch and gaming have obviously bolstered each other. They've kind of held each other up by their bootstraps, because even if someone has just played a game for fun, it is exposure for the game. But then again, someone wouldn't have the game to play in the first place if the game didn't exist. So it's definitely this symbiotic and relationship that exists between these platforms and these publishers. And I do believe that backwards and forwards, they do benefit from each other.
Yeah, no, it's been so interesting to just see how gaming has boomed, because if you think back, just 20 years in your life, could you even, what would you have thought the future of gaming would be? Like sitting in an internet cafe at 16 years old. What were you expecting things to be like compared to now?
Well, when I was sitting on my PlayStation 1, yes, in 2002, 2001, I was in the second grade. I was still extremely young, being 6 or 7 years old back then. And, for me, gaming as a concept didn't exist outside of my bubble. When I started turning 13, 14, 15, 16, I started realizing, that gaming is something that I enjoy as a pastime, and it's something that's getting quite big overseas. And looking back from 2015, even when I, finished studying, right, I never even thought it would be my career, not in South Africa. So for me, I think that gaming as an industry is just going to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger, simply because it is a new art form. It's a new generation. Our generation grew up with gaming. So it's become an accepted part of our consumption of entertainment. A lot of us aren't interested in necessarily doing crossword puzzles as much as our grandparents were, but gaming is where it's at. And I think that it's going to continue to grow, simply because demand will not diminish. We're going to be gamers that raise gamers. And as long as I'm alive, I know I'm going to want to be playing video games. So long story short, I think it's just going to grow and get better. And there's going to be people who are creative geniuses, who find gaps in the market. They find opportunities. They find different platforms. We might see the rise of cloud computing happening in the next 5 to 10 years, even in developing countries, where people won't have to own consoles. They just pay a subscription. All of the gaming processing is done on cloud, and then the video gets put to their television or gets put to their computer screen. So anything is possible. And I know that in the direction that we're going and how the industry has been growing, investors aren't going to stop, publishers aren't going to stop, and gamers are most definitely not going to stop. Whether you're trying to scratch that casual itch or that competitive itch, it's definitely going to continue growing. And the esports side of it will grow alongside of it, because, like I said, people crave competition. Like the gladiators of old loved cutting each other's heads off and having the crowds roar. The same way that we loved watching football and rugby, the same thing applies to esports.
You do bring up an interesting thing there about scratching itches, though, because gaming also has that negative side of it, and that it can be rather addictive and rather destructive. How do you guys as a team essentially manage that sort of thing? How do you monitor that within, players on your team, and just in general? I would assume that's something that you're cautious of as a gaming company.
Well, personally, I had a long journey with gaming and with how it was used as a coping mechanism. So, I mean, I've had a lot of things happen in my life which kind of put me in a position where I would rather pretend it's not there. Escapism was pretty much my thing, and gaming was a large avenue for that. So there was a massive time in my life where I was just pouring hours and hours into this, not because I was necessarily getting anything out of it, but because it was giving me an opportunity to escape. So the addiction also ties into dopamine addiction, which I don't know how much you know about, but essentially blue light from screens, cell phone screens, computer screens, everything like that actually does create dopamine release in the brain. So it really is just a feel-good thing that happens chemically, not even due to what we're consuming in terms of content. So those addictions are real, and they're things that I've had to come into terms with personally in my life. I mean, the past 3 years has been me juggling work and juggling play, and also I used to stream full time, and I think you were not full time, part time. I used to stream, essentially come home from an 8-hour job and stream for 4 hours, because I was trying to build this community around myself and around the games that I played. But after a year and a half, I realized that I was depressed. I was not fulfilled. I wasn't getting anything done to the best of my ability, because it was just not reasonable to spend that much time doing video games. So on a personal level, I've had to learn coping mechanisms. I've had to learn the healthy coping mechanisms that isn't escapism. I've had to learn to put time aside for video games in a good way. And this year is something as well that I've now kind of evolved that approach, where I'm now also putting time aside for things individually, but that I can blame on my ADD. From an organization's point of view, we have sports psychologists that are available to the players at any given time. So that's also part of them being a part of the team. So each player in each team generally follows their own structure on how they practice and play the game. And playing the game really does take a ridiculous amount of practice and a lot of time. So each of them pretty much manage that amongst themselves. But I do know that, the captains and the teams are educated in how to stay physically fit, because being physically fit is important, and having a fit mind. But also, I think the most important is the access to the sports psychologist, where he's there to answer questions, he's there to assist with anything related to that. But yeah, I don't deal with the teams a lot directly, but I do know there are things in place.
Okay, fair enough. I was just wondering because it is something that I think everyone's gone through phases, like where they probably spent few too many days in front of the console or in front of the PC. And I know it's something that like I go through phases, exactly like you say, it's like an escape mechanism. It's just like, I don't want to deal with anything else. Let me just go delve into this world. But when you're in those like states of mind, you're not even really playing the game. You're not, like you say, you're not getting value out of it. You're not enjoying it. It's not challenging you necessarily. You just get frustrated. You're just like, oh, this sucks. It's such a fucking like weird spiral.
Yeah, I think that when people play video games, what I wish I knew sooner, what I wish I knew when I was 16, even, which was 11 years ago. Damn. I wish that I knew. I wish I knew what I was doing and what my goal with gaming was back then already, because I was never gonna be a competitive player. I played competitive Black Ops 1 when I was in the 11th grade, and school pressures and things like that, and us all being very young, we never took it seriously. So if I knew from the beginning that gaming was a casual thing for me and it was something that needed to be managed from a young age, then it would have been managed better. People ask me all the time, are you going to raise your kids as gamers? I'm going to say to them, if I have kids, big if, I will raise them that they're able to be whoever they want and do whatever they want. But inside of those things, I'm going to put restrictions in place that I know from my experience will benefit them in the long run. Just like anything, if my son is going to be if one day be a motocross racer, I'm going to tell him the restrictions in place is that, you don't go riding without me until a certain age. You wear the safety equipment. The same with gaming. So many hours a day, you need to prioritize, learn priorities, and then also just realize that it affects your health, because that's something I didn't realize. And, if you can see gaming as a completely casual thing and you can manage it properly, then you're the best kind of consumer. But what we need to remember is that some gaming companies, not all of them, want you to spend as much time on the game because it becomes a monetary thing. So it's pretty much how social media has been turned into this monster to grab your attention. So have some games, especially mobile games, because why? They benefit of microtransactions. So it's also about being aware that sometimes the companies providing this entertainment don't have your best interests at heart. So it's a very complicated and complex issue.
How do you find out which of those companies, or like which companies are doing that? Because I know you and I like understand like the loot box thing, and also just essentially psychological triggers and like weird little tricks that companies do. So where do people find out about this sort of stuff, or do you even know?
Well, fortunately, mainstream media has done a good job at raising the issue internationally about loot boxes and gambling in video games. But it's not even that necessarily. It's sometimes even a lot more sinister than that. And a lot of it comes, there's a certain game, which I'm not going to mention just because I'm not here to kind of give anyone a fright, because all things can be addictive in gaming. But there's a certain game, my friend did a dissertation on this specific game and how children are addicted to it and why. And it actually comes down to the sound and the graphic combination and the different mechanics in the game cosmetically that actually make you identify with this character and make you want to almost develop it further, right? That's where you kind of become addicted and you say, cool, I'm actually addicted, my how do I put it? My dopamine gets released in these things. So I want more of that because it feels good. It's not necessarily, it doesn't feel good necessarily winning or losing. But also something like a battle royale structure is something that is also quite addictive, because you will be the very best out of 100 people, and you will have to battle and improve to get to that point. So how do you learn about it? You kind of just have to, especially as an adult, you kind of have to take responsibility. But as parents, it's very important to be educated about things like, dopamine addiction, about, the pleasure loops and things like that kind of happen psychologically. But it's also not such a terrible thing, because a lot of times it takes negligence for someone to actually fall into this kind of thing, especially children. If you manage screen time, you're going to manage the problem most of the time.
And it's also within gaming, like it's weird because like the structures that you're saying that like, create that addiction are also structures that create improvement a lot of the time, like you're saying, like in a battle royale game, you have to get good quick. Like, that is it. You are going to stop playing the game if you do not get good as quickly as possible. Because I know the first time I dropped it on Apex, like, I got murked in seconds, like literally seconds. Like, it
Yeah.
was, oh, okay, so this is how this works. Quickly hop on YouTube, quickly find out stuff. Okay, practice, practice, practice. Okay, let me try now. Still get murked. You know, same thing with like Fortnite, same thing with lots of games, same thing with like, you know, Magic, Runeterra, everything. You want to get better when you're losing, essentially. And like, I think that's not such a bad thing. It is just like you say, it's a thing of like managing screen time. Because even stuff like fighting games, it takes incredible like patience and skill and dedication to get good at them and to be able to play against other people online and to be able to actually, yeah, be competitive if you want that thing. But even playing casually these days, I guess, is pretty difficult because of content creation. So like the level of casual play has risen, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also think that no matter how much time it takes to learn a game or be good at a game, as long as you're doing it with intention, it's fine. Because if you're not doing it with intention, you tend to kind of just lose time to video games. You know, that's my personal experience. But if you're sitting at
Okay.
home and, you know, you've got a trust fund and you don't have to worry about working for the rest of your life, by all means, put all your free time. I'm not going to tell people how to spend their free time. You know, I think that the competitive grind is very healthy and it takes a lot of time. But with me is I put a lot of hours into competitive gaming, and now looking back, I don't even play those games anymore. I've put in like thousands of rands into cosmetics. I don't even play those games anymore. So it's almost just being
But do you
conscious.
see that as a waste?
No, I don't, because my experience was there and it did give me good experiences. So that's also why I'm trying not to make it look like I'm villainizing video gaming. Of course I'm not. I do it for a living. I can't, and I love it. It's one of my
Yeah.
biggest passions.
Yeah, but we've got to speak honestly about it.
Yeah, and these are mostly like personal journeys that I've had. So yeah, personal journey with it and personal downfalls, I guess. But I think that a lot of people are able to balance work and gaming and relationships and everything.
And the streaming side of things, what advice do you have to people who are starting out streaming?
I streamed for a while, and some of my advice would be, you know, specifically do it because you love it. Don't do it because you're going to try and become the next big thing. You're not going to be the next Shroud or the next Ninja overnight. So if you do streaming, bring your honest self to the table. I mean, of course, there is a bit of showmanship that's always involved, but really do it because you love it. Do it with the intention of uplifting others and not bringing others down. Remember that you are an example for someone. That's a lesson that I learned, is that you can be the change in someone's life, positively or negatively. And do it because you love it. I say it again, because that is when you'll get the most reward. You know, the followers, the subscribers, the donations, that's all just a bonus, you know, at the end of the day. If you do get to a point where you're able to put a marketing strategy in place and monetize it, then by all means do that as well. But when you start and you build it from the ground up, make sure your foundation is based on you being genuine and you loving it. Otherwise, it's going to just become another job.
Well, what did you love about streaming?
My favorite thing was being able to actively craft community around myself and the games that I played, because I could then create a space for people that I knew was conducive to them feeling comfortable and feeling like they have a place where they can speak out, where they belong, where, you know, it's a bit more like, it's kind of like friendship. It's a massive friend group that I made through streaming that I still am friends with today, and those friendships will persist for the rest of my life. If I look at you know, my girlfriend who I'm currently dating, I wouldn't be with her if it wasn't for streaming or my involvement in the gaming industry. All my friends, I've met them all online. Like, I know that sounds weird. Like, a lot of them I have from school. I'm not as close with them anymore. The people I see regularly when I travel are people that I met through streaming and the gaming industry. So for me, creating that community, fostering a place for people that was positive, and then also being able to just myself personally benefit from the amazing people that I met. That's what made it for me. And that's also why I've stopped, is because I don't feel that I'm able to give the same value in streaming as I did before. Not because I've changed, but because I don't have the capacity anymore. My job kind of takes a lot out of me. So it would then become a very selfish thing. Should I stream now? I might come back in the future, not sure, but for now, it's not a priority.
Is streaming something that you can't do casually? Because from what I understand, it needs consistency almost, you know, if you want to be able to build things. So like, I can't imagine you could like just pop in once every 2 months and actually have an audience.
Well, you can. I think it also depends on how much you've put into the streaming platform previously. So I'm fortunate enough that the 2.5 years that I streamed on and off, I did a massive following on my Twitch account, and the friendships that I made as well. Like those people form part of my community. And because my friendship with them exists outside of streaming, when I go live, some of them will still come pop back in. Some people from overseas that I've never met that I connected with through Discord and streaming before will pop in. But if you're a brand new streamer and you stream twice a month, your growth is going to be extremely slow, and it's going to be frustrating because your expectation is when I stream, I want to be able to interact and share this with people. And that doesn't always just come out of the blue. So that needs to be grown and developed. And that's where the hard work comes in. If you come into streaming and say, cool, I'm going to be the next Shroud, then you have to be consistent with your streams. You have to put a lot of time. You have to put additional marketing into it. You have to think, how am I going to get my content out there? Because Twitch doesn't throw your stuff around. It doesn't promote you. It doesn't promote anyone. It's just this massive container of people creating content. So you have to leverage other social media sites to be able to give yourself the exposure to be able to do this. I mean, TikTok is probably the best example right now. Dare I say it? It's where people can get content viral quickly. Quite a few streamers that I follow, I found through TikTok when I still used it about a year ago. I don't anymore because, that's all I did was watch that damn platform. So yeah, long story short, you can do it casually if you have a bit of a following. You can probably even get away with it if you haven't got much of a following. But again, it's a very complex issue and it depends on what you want to get out of it.
What advice do you have to people streaming to 0 viewers?
It won't stay 0 forever. Think about ways that you can market your stream, like I said. But also the most important thing is that you need the invisible man that sits on the top of your monitor that you speak to. He sits on top of your webcam and you speak to him, and you kind of say, describe what you're doing, create a presence, create an entertainment system or platform, without anyone being there. Because when people join, all that'll happen then is you have this sort of rhythm that you've developed, but you'll just have people in chat that you respond to. So it'll fill a little bit more of your gaps. People who join streams and you're just sitting there staring at a screen, you're not going to retain them. So how can you bring the unique parts of yourself into a broadcast? Crafting that kind of broadcast and entertainment is something that's difficult. What avenues can I take? Is it specifically the content, the game that I'm playing? Is it how I approach the content? Is it, special little mini games that you guys can play in my chat? Is it community-based things that I run once a week? It's literally up to you to design, an experience that'll bring people and will keep them there.
And what sort of effect does streaming have on competitive play? Say someone is, really, really good at a game and they want to maybe build an audience around being good at that game. A lot of people just build audiences around themselves and having fun playing a game, but others do it because they're really good. Now, what effect does streaming have on the quality of play for someone like that, someone who wants to get into that aspect of streaming?
It, again, is really person to person. I think some people are way better at multitasking than me. I wouldn't be surprised because I'm terrible at it. And some competitive gamers play the game and they hardly pay attention to chat. And that's because they're there and they're good at the game. And then that's their selling point to their audience. They don't have to entertain you because people are there to watch your high level play. Whereas sometimes you get people who are competitive and who do provide high level play and who are personable. But it's, for me personally, because I'm such a community-based person and I'm driven by people, when I play a competitive game, I tend to perform worse. One of the hidden caveats of that also is that people sometimes think they do worse on stream because they aren't paying attention to the video game, but it's actually because sometimes your hardware can't even support gaming and streaming at the same time. You get performance loss that's so minimal it actually makes a difference to your gameplay. So again, it's another complicated issue, but it really depends from person to person.
Okay, fair enough. You wanted to actually talk about some of the issues in South African esports at the moment. How is South African esports failing?
Oh, well, I think at the moment it's at the best that it's ever been, but I do believe that focus on grassroots, like I mentioned before, is probably one of the things that needs the most focus on, providing opportunities to people who don't necessarily have the access. And that's very difficult because, the money has to come from somewhere to be able to do that. So personally, I would want to be able to involve communities and underprivileged communities in gaming, because there's probably the next, as Ronaldo is to football, there is someone out there who doesn't have access to things that will be probably the best Tekken player, or could be the best Tekken player in the world, or could be the best FIFA player, or could even be the best Call of Duty player in the world, just with that natural talent. So investment into grassroots is one of the things that I would definitely want to see more of in South African esports, and we have seen some amazing efforts from organizations in the country already. So I'm very stoked to see that. Additionally, from an esports, it's a very insular industry with different people and different groups of people who are all working towards creating a product that can become profitable, but they're not willing to work together with other organizations. They're not they're very quick to talk badly about individuals or about organizations because it's almost like a land grab for opportunity, where I think a lot of international esports scenes see similar things, but there's a lot more cooperation, which allows for, more widespread growth and almost coordinated growth between these different companies. And I think that's just a symptom of it being a developing industry in South Africa. Is everyone feels like you need to secure your patch, you need to pick it, you need to fence off your wall, and no one else allowed, don't walk on the grass, this is my patch. Where my thing is that collaboration breeds innovation. People say that competition breeds innovation, where you need to be better and bigger than your competition. Where I've had conversations and I've got very good relationships with a lot of individuals who are involved with competing companies in my field, and the stuff we chat about and we come up with, should we have the funds, we would be able to pull off some crazy stuff together. So those are pretty much the two main things. But again, it's also, you got your normal problems in South African communities, not necessarily the ones that are high involved in esports, but in the normal gaming communities. We have a lot of racism that happens in video games. I'm pretty sure you would have seen some of it yourself. We have a lot of sexism. I mean, and it's particularly bad in South Africa. Like when I play internationally, it's not as bad as it is locally. So that's another problem, is kind of, why is our nation so ready and able to treat people so badly online and in video games? Like that, I don't understand. That I'd love some insight into. But those are the kind of the main issues.
I mean, someone screaming toxic masculinity at you right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like 100%. And how do we create safe spaces for females, for non-binary people, for people of any gender, really, and any sexuality and any belief system, really, at the end of the day? Because a lot of the times these places aren't safe, especially for women. We had our organization had a basically like media training for all of our teams, where we sat in and we spoke about the actual theory behind what being responsible on social media is, and where does morality come from, and how does this stuff all fit in. And interestingly enough, our female CSGO team really was the most striking, because they talk about the blatant sexism that they face on a regular basis. So that is a very big problem, because it's stopping growth of the esports industry. And I think that there's also a lot of drama in different gaming titles as well. The Fortnite community in South Africa, there's been a lot of coverage for them lately about behaviors coming out of players and organizations, and how that will affect sponsorship and investment. So again, just like the things that I would like to see improve, the problems are, just as large. But it's not hopeless, I don't think. I think that it just highlights the issues that we already experience. It's a platform that, because a lot of people are anti-games and anti-esports, they kind of say, oh, look at what these video games are doing to these people, when it's really actually just a platform for the bigotry that's been instilled in them. So it's a very hectic conversation.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, it is a sign of society at large. And that's one thing I don't know how to deal with. Obviously, a lot of games have gotten better, at least with the reporting system. So like in-game abuse has gone down a fair amount, or at least, I mean, you still get sworn at a lot, but you get slurs a lot less than a few years ago. So that's at least cool. But like social media is the one thing where you just see it being, a lot of people getting a lot of flack just for living their lives. But one thing that I do think is cool about gaming, on the other aspect of it, is that it's allowed a lot of these communities to actually come together. I know there's a big trans community on Twitch. You see a lot of streamers coming out on Twitch as trans. Well, not, they're trans. They don't come out on Twitch as trans. They're trans and they're on Twitch. And they've found each other. And the community has really just grown and grown and grown. And that's one thing that I think is amazing about platforms like Twitch, is that they do offer you the space to find your community. And, you can mod it. You can, within those spaces, get rid of the people who are full of shit and who want to try and ruin your day. Whereas Twitters are just so much more chaotic, and it's so much more, there's just, too many anonymous assholes, essentially.
Exactly. And, having those trans communities and those safe spaces for people is extremely important. And kind of what I mentioned is that community is curated by the streamer themselves. And I think that there's also seems to be this almost, I don't want to say hive mind, but collective consciousness almost of people in these communities that know that because they are a minority and because a lot of the majority won't accept them, they need to create these own spaces for themselves. So it is beautiful because it does give them a safe space to exist. I wish that them having to carve out these spaces for themselves shouldn't be necessary. But again, that's an ideal. It's an ideal that I don't know if we're ever going to reach, but Twitch does provide platforms for people. And I think it takes a very special kind of individual to completely accept people for just who they are. And luckily enough, you and I have had the pleasure of knowing quite a few of these people. I know there are a bunch of people that we know that just kind of have the base ideology of, if you want to be who you are, you have every right to be who you are, and I don't have any say in it. That kind of ideology is the baseline for tolerance, which doesn't exist in all these spaces. So again, it's a projection of the problems of the world, and unfortunately, until I think that there's a lot of awareness being grown towards these, and I think that the younger generations are moving towards a space where we're leaving the bigotry of the previous generations behind. And I do believe that it does belong to the previous generation, while it's still involved in our generation. I'm not going to pretend like there aren't people out there who are sexist, racist, and who marginalize other minority groups. I think that we're moving in a direction where these communities and these spaces are going to grow and are going to have a positive impact. So I'm more kind of mirroring what you've already said.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about how you were mentioning, like grassroots kind of thing, and I was just thinking about like how arcades in like Japan and Korea are just everywhere, and like how they were pretty big like when we were kids and stuff. Is that something that could actually happen, like mobile, arcades, essentially? Is that, like, what kind of events have you got planned as the events guy at ATK? Essentially is where I'm going to go with that. That's the question I'm going to find out of that stream of consciousness.
Well, to answer your question, we're first going to have to look at it for what it is the kind of duality between developed and developing countries. In a developed country, there are obviously people who are below the breadline who can't afford these things, but there is a much higher access to infrastructure in developed countries, and a lot of providers that are able to, because of support from these people, provide these experiences. So for us as ATK, I mean, we have a LAN arena which has a structure that people come in and they pay for their hours, and that's the time that they get. That's still giving access to people, but there'll still be people that won't be able to afford that. So in terms of those kind of grassroots things, it's going to take some, if I had to become the next Elon Musk, right, overnight, I would love to use gaming as a tool to be able to equip and educate, and give opportunities to people through esports, give esports bursaries to people where they can go and study and play esports. Like, that kind of thinking has to come from somewhere, but those models have to be developed. And especially in a developing country like South Africa, it is tough. In terms of where we're going, as ATK, with where COVID is at the moment, we're having to sort of pivot online again, which means a lot of the events don't take place in the arena. A lot of it takes place online. So the broadcasting, the social media and marketing plans, everything happens online. The players play online from their homes. So yeah, we've got some exciting stuff coming up that's going to be announced in the next 2-3 weeks, which I can't talk about yet, unfortunately. In 3 weeks time, I can send you a voice note with the update and you can just slap it on here. Kidding. Yeah, pretty much just, again, trying to create premium esports experiences, which is our main focus. So to be able to provide opportunities for high-end players to be able to prove that they're the best. And again, to echo as an MGO, what we're doing is we're currently sending our CSGO team soon, to North America when everything's safe, so that they can compete at a higher level. So at the moment, there is a gap, and I know that there will be development in the future to be able to link this high-end competitive play and grassroots, to be able to give people the opportunity to make it from maybe where they're underprivileged or not able to have access to these things to a place where they'll be able to be in their proving ground.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a tough task considering, like people who have access to stuff at home versus, people who don't. But at the same time, I'm excited to see where you guys actually go with that, and just in general, how things develop. But what is your strategy in terms of actually getting word out there now with ATK? Because I know you guys are big in the gaming community, but how do you go further than that? How do you actually grow the gaming community from here, essentially, as ATK?
So that's been the difficult thing that I've experienced in both of the industries, in the tabletop industry as well as the esports industry, is how do we break out of these insular bubbles of community that exist?
Yeah.
Because people find the esports community by accident. I talk to so many people and they're like, wow, I didn't even know esports existed until my friend said, yo, you should get on Twitter because that's where a lot of this stuff happens. And so that is the big thing, is how do we get players into hobby stores to play card games and board games? How do we get people into, these competitive events to play in esports and support the industry? One of the strategies that I have is forming relationships with publishers, because a lot of publishers have, social media and marketing reach outside of, these organizations that run esports events. So an example is Ubisoft. We try and leverage with Ubisoft to kind of promote events and promote the competitive scene outside of just what we do, because they also have different types of players. They don't only have esports players. They've got the Assassin's Creed player. They've got the Watch Dogs player. They've got they've got these people who are based around their products but aren't necessarily involved in the scene. So that's one approach that I have. Again, it's also pretty much kind of like initiatives like Recruiter Buddy. Like, if I had to have a more casual type of event, I would always kind of try and bring more people into the scene. Because at the end of the day, bringing them into the scene benefits it in every single way. It's an extra view. It's an extra impression on a post on social media. So it's feeding into that economy of esports. But the answer, if I could bring every South African with a PC into esports, it would be a different story. But a lot of them who just play on the games, even the competitive games in the lobbies, don't even know that the scene exists. So you asked me a difficult question that if I had the answer to, we'd be sitting on my house in Llandudno right now, having a beer,
Fair enough. I mean, it is kind of your job, though. That's all I'm saying. It's just a part of what you're meant to be doing. So that's why I was just asking how you're doing it. So
it is difficult to bring people from outside the community, and right now that's a very organic and passive thing that's happening. But yeah, trying to include people that aren't necessarily competitive is also another thing.
How much do you see stuff like celebrity to like Twitch streaming and also like stuff going the other way around? Like I saw Ninja on Guy Fieri's grocery show. Like I don't know if you've seen that show. He's got a grocery shop and he makes people do stuff in like crazy ways because he's Guy Fieri. But yeah, I saw Ninja on there with his dad, and it was just like that's something, that is like people are gonna go like, oh wow, is a gamer on the show, like what is this thing, right? Or am I thinking
no, it is. It is one of the things that will bring people towards communities. I mean, if we're talking about gaming in general, when you've got these gaming personalities getting involved in the mainstream, that's when things get exciting, because that's when you're growing this industry. And people will argue with me and say, esports is mainstream, gaming is mainstream. But yeah, that's probably more applicable internationally, but if we have to determine now, is it gaming or is it competitive gaming? Because they are actually two different bubbles.
Well, because PewDiePie is like one of the biggest known people in the world, like just straight up. Like he's probably more famous than a lot of actors.
Yeah, so exactly. He's a great ambassador for gaming, in my opinion, and content creation. Not always necessarily with his political views. He's made some mistakes, like we can all agree on that. But, as an ambassador to gaming and shining light on gaming, it is definitely valuable for everyone involved. For, the top end games like League of Legends getting a Mercedes-Benz sponsorship, it's the same kind of mechanic where people are like, cool, so the gamers are like, whoa, we're sponsored by, our game is sponsored by League of Legends. And then you've got Mercedes-Benz people who follow their social media saying, whoa, what is this? This is a video game. It's that cross-pollination and awareness of industries, which is definitely a big step forward. And we're seeing it more and more every day. We're seeing it in endorsements, personal endorsements of streamers. We're seeing it in sponsorships of teams and organizations and tournaments. We're seeing it also in industry. I posted a post the other day where I was talking about how the gaming industry needs to be more vocal about employment opportunities that it creates for people. And the case study that I used was basically Industrial Light and Magic, which is one of the derivatives of Lucasfilm, like legacy Lucasfilm. Yeah. They're the guys who create all the VFX around The Mandalorian, and they basically use this magic room, which are LED screens that surround the set. They don't use green screen for Mandalorian. And how this whole thing works is that the screens are populated with an engine that's built on the Unreal Engine. That's built by gamers, but now it's being used in film. Fuck. So cross-pollination of industry as well is incredibly important, because I know that ATK and Warren Barkhazen, who's my CEO, one of his main things is to provide opportunity for people for employment. Because again, when you provide employment in these industries, you're also giving it more legitimacy as an industry. Like me as a South African saying, hey, I work a full-time job in esports. I'm one of a handful of people that can say that. So again, that's another way of looking at it, is that, you know what, if gamers who run gaming studios develop engines that can develop movies one day, or they can develop simulations that can be used for life-saving operations remotely, but they're gamers and it's built on that gaming framework, that's a brilliant and useful cross-pollination of industries.
Cool. How did you get the name Noobslice?
I was 11 years old, and I actually can't remember, but it must have been just a combination of words where my friend kind of said, cheers, home slice. And then I was just kind of like, I needed a gaming name. And when I was 11 was when I really actually started playing, where I just started getting involved in gaming, and I needed a stream name. I think back then I was playing with my friends. I was playing like Quake, and I was playing Unreal Tournament and those things kind of just before.
I fucking knew you were one of those guys.
Just before the modern warfare era, because when the modern warfare era started was when my gaming really took off from a competitive nature. So it was pretty much taking home slice. Yeah. And yeah, so I think it was a combination of home slice and then popping noob in there, and it's been Noobslice, and it's been like that for the past however many years. I don't even know now, and I will never change it.
Cool. So yeah, where can people find you on the internet?
You guys can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/NoobsliceZA. I haven't managed to cop that Noobslice username yet, because there's some random dude who hasn't given it up after like 6 years of being inactive. You guys can catch me on Twitch as well. I'm not super active on Twitch at the moment, but hopefully will be more in the future. Twitch.tv/Noobslice. And yeah, those are the main places where you'll find me. And if you need to chat to me about anything else, you can chat to me through there.
And where can people find you in real life?
People can find me in Cape Town. I've been a Cape Town baby my whole life. I love it here. I love the ocean. And yeah, I'm always around for a beer, COVID pending.
Sweet. Well, yeah, I'm going to take you up on that the second I am allowed to. Or the second I get the fucking vaccine, dude. I am coming to Cape Town, and then I'm going to Joburg. Or it's the other way around. But I am flying as soon as I can get a fucking vaccine.
Fantastic. I look forward to seeing you. Maybe we can have some shots after we've had our shots.
Yeah, I'm fucking down with that. Later, bro.
Awesome, man. Cheers, Bob.